Half-Life 2, a game that I bought a couple of years ago but never really got around to playing until now. This script is being written right at the tail end of finishing Half-Life 2, so it's fresh in my mind, and I'm sure there are people out there interested to hear a modern gamer's perspective on the award-winning title. Half-Life 2 was released in 2004, developed and published by Valve Corporation. The game served as a successor to the 1998 game Half-Life, also developed by Valve, but published by Sierra Entertainment, the same company that brought us King's Quest. Now, I played and I think completed the first Half-Life when I was maybe 8 or 9, but I remember next to nothing, so I tried to play the game a few months ago, but it was just too dated. Ironically, I got halfway through Half-Life. Half-Life 2 was followed up by 2 shorter games of a planned trilogy named, confusingly, Half-Life 2 Episode 1 in 2006 and Half-Life 2 Episode 2 in 2007, but this review is not about those games. Forget they ever existed, because this review is for Half-Life 2 as a standalone experience. Maybe sometime in the future I'll review the episodes, but for now, pay them no mind. Okay, let's jump into the review. First off, the game runs perfectly, though I have a pretty good system and the game is 11 years old, so that needs to be considered, but honestly, it's Valve. The game probably ran really well at release because Valve is a reliable PC developer. So, for 2004, this game is bleeding edge beyond its years. The game is stunning, and Valve made some really smart decisions that allowed them to make the game so beautiful on hardware that really shouldn't have been able to run it. In a similar vein, the physics is more advanced and free than many games now, though it would often get me killed when it didn't work properly. That aside, the art style is nothing interesting. It's got a fairly generic game look, but that's neither a bad point nor a good point, it's just a thing. The character design is good. The human enemies and NPCs can be repetitive at times, but the alien and robot enemies are really varied in terms of design and some really cool mechanics to go with them. One of my favorites is a robot that flies towards you and takes extremely bright photographs of you, alerting the enemies of your presence and blinding you at the same time. Now, the critic in me wants to break out and shout about how great the level design is. There's a lot of variety here, and you'll find yourself in many different environments that flow seamlessly into one another. That said, I had a lot of trouble with getting lost in this game, like a lot more than usual, and I chalk up to the individual environments being repetitive. Sure, at one point you end up inside a prison, but does the prison look different from room to room? Not really, which makes sense for a prison, but I feel like they didn't maybe put enough detail into the environments in order to make everything immediately recognizable. Though that might be a nitpick, and it might be more of a me problem than a Half-Life 2 problem. Just know that if you have a bad sense of direction in games, you might find this aspect of the game frustrating. So I'm pretty happy with the presentation. Moving on. The shooting feels good, particularly for a 2004 game. A lot of the time I had tons of fun with the combat. The guns aim nice and precisely, and you have a nice varied arsenal of weapons that you'll find that most of the time there's a situation for each weapon. One of these in particular that feels out of place is the revolver, but I'll get into that in a sec. Some things that really impress me about the mechanics. New enemy types are introduced right up until the end of the game, keeping it fresh throughout, though it's important to note that large sections of the game are made up just fighting human enemies, which can get repetitive fast. The other thing that impressed me though was the introduction of new mechanics throughout. Now, there were puzzles here and there, but they were really just used to show off the physics. It was nothing too difficult, but things like vehicles, new weapons until pretty late in the game, and otherwise a couple of really master strokes, particularly one near the end of the game that really switched up how the game works completely. There are also some really innovative mechanics that still aren't even present in modern games, which confuses me, but nevertheless, being able to drop grenades at your feet or roll them instead of throwing them are a really fresh use of grenades, even by today's standards. There's a lot of weapons, which is a good point that I already mentioned, but with that comes a relatively difficult to navigate inventory. It's just pretty awkward and it becomes a real chore sometimes just to switch between weapons. There's also no iron sights, which automatically for me makes the shooting feel a bit less refined than normal games. Also, the inability to aim grenades in any meaningful way was incredibly frustrating for me. 60% of the time when I threw a grenade, it would bounce off of an invisible wall or not land where I needed it to. The other thing is, I've talked about the variety in this game, and there's a metric shit ton of variety, but somehow it manages to be stale. The game isn't hard, but it also isn't easy. The problem is that what gives the game difficulty is just increasing the number of enemies, decreasing the damage you deal to them, and increasing the damage they deal to you. This is what I mean by weapons like the revolver. At the beginning of the game, I enjoyed the revolver. Limited ammo, slow fire rate, one-hit kills. It was a real precision weapon. That's the kind of weapon I love in a game. But as the game went on and I fought enemies with better armor, it'd be a two-hit kill, which rendered a weapon that felt incredibly satisfying and tactical almost completely useless. Enemies quickly become bullet sponges, and by the end of the game I was very tired with the combat, or I would have been if they didn't shake up the mechanics the way they did. The fact they broke up the traditional shooting with a few fun gimmicks is really the gameplay's saving grace. Overall, the gameplay is good. There's some great moments in there, but the normal gunplay can quickly become boring, especially near the end of the game. I'm just going to open with how I feel. The story was the biggest disappointment of this game for me. The story is dragged out over 10 to 15 hours, but the actual plot could have been conveyed in 2 to 3 hours, maybe even less than that. This, in my opinion, leads to some horrendous pacing issues where the story is concerned. Sure, mechanics-wise, the first two-thirds of the game are pretty good, but the story practically doesn't exist in the first two-thirds. There's so much pointless meandering as far as the plot is concerned that I just couldn't become invested enough, and it felt like the writers weren't even trying to keep me invested for most of it. There are some good scenes scattered throughout the first two-thirds, but for the most part the story has very little purpose and direction. It's basically, go see this guy that has had little to no character development, go rescue this person that you just don't care about because they haven't been given enough time to grow. I feel like the story would have felt more compelling with a companion of some sort akin to BioShock Infinite or The Last of Us. To an extent you have a companion, but most of the time she's away doing something else while you fight the bad guys. And when you finally do reach the last third of the game, where 90% of the character and plot is, you're so close to the end of the game that there is no time to get to know these otherwise well-written characters. It's a shame because I felt myself caring near the end, but it was only at the end, you know, when the story was over. And while we're on the subject of the ending, what the hell was that? It seemed like a buy the sequel to see the real ending kind of deal. So that's all the negative story stuff off my chest and out of the way. As I mentioned, the characters are well written and generally believable. There are some really damn charming moments with some of the characters throughout the game, along with one or two pretty touching scenes too.
Here we go. Ah! Damn it, get it off me! Lamar, there you are. I thought you got rid of that pest.
Certainly not. Never fear, Gordon. She's debeaked and completely harmless. The worst she might do is attempt to couple with your head, fruitlessly.
All in all, the story might have been good for 2004, but it absolutely does not hold up in 2015, in my opinion. I'm sorry to everyone who loves Half-Life 2's story. I'm sure if I played it at the time, I'd have loved it as well. As always, I choose a place for every game I review to go in the game chart. If you're not familiar, it's my version of a scoring system. I put the game somewhere on the list of other games, with the game at the top being my favorite and the game at the bottom being my least favorite. You get the idea. If you'd like to see the chart in its entirety, link is always available in the description. So I'm putting Half-Life 2 above the Music Machine but below Nico Through the Dream. I seriously loved Nico. It would just feel wrong to put Half-Life 2 above it. But I think I got a slightly more fulfilling experience out of Half-Life 2 than the Music Machine. The Music Machine got extra brownie points in its review because it was made by a single guy, you know? It really is great for a team of one, but Half-Life 2 I think I got more out of overall. Despite it being relatively low on my list, it is getting a Rye seal of approval. If you don't know what this is, it's not a badge to say everyone should play the game or a guarantee you'll enjoy it. It's my way of rewarding a game for innovation, great ideas, or doing a specific element of the game exceptionally well. I'm giving it this seal for two reasons. One, it was a very influential game. It innovated on so many established mechanics and changed them for the better. The other reason is managing to create a game so visually advanced, but still a great game. That's actually pretty hard to do, and Valve clearly spread their resources effectively. So I can't say I enjoyed the game all that much, but I recognize its importance, so it definitely deserves the seal. Thank you so much for watching. See ya.